Hello, Facebook. It's great to see you. I'm really excited to be on this week. I'm going to come on live 5 days in a row, and every day I'm going to talk about another reason why you keep on binging. And what prompted me to want to do this and come on daily is because it's so important to understand the why we do something. And when you understand the why, at that point you're able to make changes. And when you understand what's going on, it changes everything. So if you are watching live, please say hi. Hi, Mandy. If you're watching the replay, please say hi. Let me know that you guys are on. If you have questions along the way, please drop them below. And I'm just going to get started. I have lots of notes for today. So number one reason, it's not the number one reason, but reason number one why you binge is because that our brains are actually wired to binge. And I think it's so important that you understand your brain science and what's going on so that you understand that it's not you and that you're actually meant to do this. So think about it. When we were cavemen and we were evolving, literally living in caves, and we didn't have the access to the food that we have nowadays, the only way that they would eat is when they killed something or when they found food. And so they would go into what you now call feast and famine. So our survival actually depended on us with binge eating, because when the food was around, when you caught an animal, when you harvested the food, it was for a temporary amount of time. So our brains were actually designed to overeat, and it was based on our survival. Those that didn't eat enough food didn't survive. So we came from the evolution of people that binge eat. So our brains are actually wired to binge. Now, why is this important to know? It's important to know so that we can work around it and we can outsmart our brain. Now, it's important to understand that there are two different parts of your brain. There is our primitive brain, which is really our subconscious mind, which is where a lot of our primitive behaviors come from. So the need to binge comes from our primitive brain. Then we have our prefrontal cortex, which is our front part, which is our human brain, and which is where we're able to make decisions. And so it's important to understand how both parts of your brains work so that you can use your prefrontal cortex to outsmart the primitive one, that is where your binge eating comes from. So binge eating is actually a habit. It's something that you, over time, have now been conditioned to binge, and which is why it feels like you have no control over food. That's the number one thing that I hear from my clients. And hey, Amy, good to see you, is that I hear from my clients, and I know for myself, when I was at the lowest point of my binge eating, I literally thought there was something wrong with me. I thought that I was made different and that I'm never going to be able to stop binging, because it was so hard for me to stop or to feel like I had control over food. And I'm going to go into that right now of why that happens, because I think it's so important to understand so that you know it's not you and that it's just your brain and it's a habit that you've created. And now that habit is in your primitive mind, which becomes subconscious, and so it's what we do automatically. So once again, going back to when we were cavemen, the food that we had there were very, it wasn't the high concentrated hits of dopamine that we get now. Actually, let me step back. We are driven by desire. We are driven by pleasure. That is how we evolve. Our brains, in order to keep us alive, we had to chase something, which would be the pleasure. So when we have a hit, or when we had food when we were cavemen, let's say it was like berries or honey, we'd get a small hit of dopamine in our mind. And that is what caused us to want to go back and eat even more. But now what we've done is that we've taken flour and we've taken sugar and we've taken all these food that we have now, I guess, what's the right word, processed foods. And the processed foods, the reward in the brain is a very high concentrated hit of dopamine. So we're getting way too much pleasure from our food now. So then our brain, because it's designed to do what feels good, our brain is designed to continue to do what is going to keep us alive. Now our brain has gotten really good at chasing those high hits of dopamine, which your brain is like, oh, this is the most important thing. This feels so good. We need to keep on doing this. So then you continue to overeat, and then your brain then sends it to the primitive brain, and it becomes subconscious. So that is why now binge eating, overeating, it's a subconscious thing. It's something we do automatically. In order to not do it, we would have to get awareness. We would have to get authority over our thoughts and our behaviors in order to not to do it. So right now, if you're struggling with binge eating, emotional eating, overeating, it's because it is in your subconscious. And so your goal to get it to not be subconscious is to now decondition it. Now, let me talk about deconditioning for a minute. You guys have probably all have heard of the famous experiment with the Pavlov's dogs. You know, when they ring the bell and then the dog salivates. So what happened in this experiment is that they realized is that they would ring a bell, which was just a neutral circumstance, and then they would give a dog food, which would be a reward. So over time, every single time they ring the bell, they would get the food and the dog would salivate. And eventually the dog realized that every single time that the bell was going to ring, they were going to eat, so they would salivate. So that we didn't even have to give them the food for it to salivate, that they were conditioned that once the bell was ring, the conditioned response was to salivate. That is what you do now with food. So you have a thought, or you see your favorite store that you drive by, and you have a conditioned response of like, oh, I need to have that. And then automatically your brain goes into, I need to have it. You have an urge. It feels uncontrollable. You give into the urge and you end up eating. You keep on reinforcing that behavior in your life, which is why it feels really uncontrollable, because it's now subconscious. Now, in order to stop that, what you need to do is you need to be exposed to the stimulus, which is the food or your favorite place or whatever circumstance that happens that makes you want to binge, and you feel the urge, and then you don't give into the urge and you don't binge, and you do that enough time, and eventually your brain is going to rewire, and then you're not going to have desire for the food. Now, this is the most important part. The reason why you binge is because of you have an urge and you have the desire. Think about it. If you did not have desires and if you did not have urges, it would not drive you to want to eat the food. So if we take away the desire and we take away the urges, then there's no problem. And that's what I help my clients do with literally rewiring their brain. So they're not just creating a life where they're not binging and they feel like they're being restricted and they feel like there's so much suffering, but actually rewiring your brain so that there's just no desire, so you don't want it, and so the suffering is taken away altogether. I love to give the analogy of a pack of cigarettes. If you don't smoke cigarettes, this will work great. If you do smoke cigarettes, just pick something else that you don't have a desire for. So if somebody were to put a pack of cigarettes right next to me, I would literally have no desire for it. I don't smoke. I don't really want it. Now, if somebody were to put a pack of fresh baked cookies next to me, I would have desire for it. And the only reason why you have those conditioned responses is because over time, that's what you've done mostly. So my goal is to help give you freedom so that your brain doesn't desire that, so that the way you feel about cigarettes is the way that you eventually feel about food, and you take the struggle off together. So this is how you decondition your brain. So the takeaway from this Facebook Live for day one of why you binge eat is that you binge eat because your brain was wired to. It's the way that our brains were meant. Binge eating is a habit. There is nothing wrong with you. That is why you feel out of control, is because it is now this behavior and the responses towards food is in your primitive brain, and you're conditioned to respond like that. Now, how you get out of this and how you stop with the binge eating is that you rewire your brain to not want it. You decondition it, which is when you allow urges. And that is a skill set. So you're just really technically one skill set away from not binge eating. And that's the skill set that I teach my clients. And that's what I can help you do too. So if you're interested in truly being free from binging, from truly not having desire and having to go through the struggle and truly wanting to stop, I am here to help you with stopping binging by rewiring your brain. So I offer free 30-minute sessions, and this is something that I can get you started with on these calls. You're gonna walk away with strategies that you can apply right away to start this process of deconditioning your brain. So I hope that you enjoyed today's live. I'm going to be coming back on tomorrow. It will be a good one. Let me see. Actually, what am I talking about tomorrow? Sorry, I wish I had that up. Oh, okay. So tomorrow is the #1 reason why you binge. And if you don't have this, you won't binge. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So stay tuned, and I can't wait to see you then. Have a great one.